The old Zephyrian warrior Kelthak sat in the dimly lit tavern on Station Omega-7, his 6 arms trembling as he poured another glass of Andromedan whiskey. Around him, young recruits from 12 different species listened with wide eyes and nervous silence. They had begged the veteran to tell them about the great human war, the conflict that changed everything in the galaxy. Kelthak's crystalline skin bore scars from plasma burns, and his 3 eyes glowed amber in the low light. He'd fought in battles across 40 star systems, but nothing had prepared him for what humanity brought to the galaxy. The recruits leaned forward as he began to speak in his gravelly voice. "It was 15 cycles ago when we first encountered them," Kelthak said slowly. "The hegemony controlled half the galaxy then. We thought we were unstoppable with our energy shields and quantum weapons. Then these strange bipedal creatures appeared from a small blue world they called Earth. The tavern grew quieter as other patrons stopped their conversations to listen. Stories about humans were rare and always drew attention. I was serving under War Chief Vorthak aboard the dreadnought Crimson Thunder," Kelthak continued. "Our fleet had just conquered the Rigel system when our sensors detected unknown ships approaching. 12 vessels, primitive by our standards, made of metal alloys and chemical propulsion systems. A young Altarian recruit with blue skin and 4 eyes spoke up nervously. "Commander, how could such primitive ships pose any threat to the hegemony fleet?" Kelthak made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. "That is exactly what we thought, young one. Our ships were 3 times larger, powered by dark matter reactors, and equipped with weapons that could shatter moons. These human vessels looked like museum pieces." The old warrior took a long drink before continuing. "War Chief Vorthak ordered a standard intimidation broadcast. We demanded their immediate surrender and told them to prepare for processing as slave labor. The response we received changed everything." Kelthak's 3 eyes focused on each recruit. In turn, a human voice came through our communications system, calm, steady, almost bored. The voice said, "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or face the consequences." The recruits exchanged glances. They had never heard of anyone speaking to the mighty hegemony with such casual disrespect. Vorthak laughed so hard he nearly fell from his command throne, Kelthak remembered. He ordered our weapons charged and commanded the human ships to be destroyed quickly. He wanted to make an example of these primitive beings. The old veteran's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "What happened next will haunt me until my dying breath. The human ships did not flee. They did not beg for mercy. Instead, they did something that should have been impossible." Kelthak finished his drink and looked directly at the young faces around him. "They attacked first." The silence in the tavern was complete as Kelthak continued his tale. His 6 arms moved slowly as he described the battle that changed galactic history forever. "Admiral Kane's ships moved like nothing we had ever seen," the old Zephyrian said. "They were smaller and supposedly weaker, but they flew with precision that defied physics, while our massive dreadnoughts tried to track them. The human vessels danced between our plasma volleys like leaves in a storm." A Centaurian recruit with thick armor plating leaned forward. "But surely your superior weapons eventually overwhelmed them, Commander." Kelthak's amber eyes dimmed with remembered horror. "That is what we expected. Our plasma cannons could melt asteroids. Our quantum torpedoes could crack planets. But hitting a target requires the target to be where you think it will be. The humans seemed to know where we would fire before we did." The veteran warrior gestured with his upper arms while his lower hands remained steady on the table. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the human ship called Defiant. It was 1/3 the size of our smallest cruiser, but it moved through our formation like a predator among prey. Her weapons were kinetic projectiles, simple metal slugs fired at incredible velocity. Kelthek paused to order another drink, his hands shaking slightly. These primitive bullets punched through our energy shields like they were made of paper. We learned later that humans had studied our shield frequencies and designed their ammunition specifically to penetrate our defenses. The young soldiers around the table exchanged worried glances. This was not the story of hegemony superiority they had been taught. War Chief Vothak became furious as our ships took damage, Kelthak continued. He ordered ramming speed, intending to crush the human vessels with our superior mass. The dreadnought Crimson Thunder was 10 kilometers long and massed more than a small moon. No ship could survive a collision with us. The old warrior's voice grew quiet and strained. Commander Jake Morrison of the human vessel Retribution did not try to avoid our ramming attack. Instead, he accelerated directly toward us. At the last second, his ship released something we had never seen before. Kelthak's three eyes stared into the distance as he relived the memory. Thousands of small objects scattered from the human ship like seeds from a dying flower. We thought they were escape pods or debris. We were wrong. They were mines, but not any mines we understood. A Rigelian recruit with tentacles instead of arms made a soft whistling sound of curiosity. What kind of mines, Commander? Nuclear. Weapons? Kelthak said simply. Primitive atomic fusion devices that released energy by splitting matter itself. Our sensors had never encountered such crude technology, so our shields did not protect us. The tavern erupted in shocked murmurs. Nuclear weapons were considered ancient history, abandoned by civilized species millions of years ago in favor of cleaner energy weapons. The explosions tore through our hull like fire through dry wood, Kelthak remembered. Bulkheads that could withstand meteor impacts crumpled like leaf paper. The radiation poisoned everything it touched. But the worst part was not the damage to our ship. The old veteran leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The worst part was watching Commander Morrison's ship after the explosion. The blast should have destroyed his vessel along with ours. Any rational being would have fled after releasing such weapons, but Morrison kept coming. Kelthak's 6 arms trembled as he reached for his drink. His ship was burning, atmosphere, venting into space, but he kept attacking. The humans aboard were dying from radiation exposure, but they kept fighting. When our boarding parties tried to capture their vessel, we found something that broke our understanding of warfare forever. The recruits waited in terrified silence as Kelthak prepared to reveal the most disturbing part of his story. Kelthak stared into his empty glass as if searching for answers in its depths. The young recruits around him waited patiently, sensing that the worst part of his story was yet to come. Other patrons in the tavern had quietly moved closer, drawn by the tale of humanity's first appearance in galactic warfare. When our boarding teams breached the human ship Retribution, Kelthak began slowly, we expected to find survivors ready to surrender. What we found instead changed everything we thought we knew about warfare and sacrifice. The old Zephyrians. Crystalline skin seemed to darken as he remembered. The human crew was dying from radiation poisoning. Their primitive medical technology could not protect them from the nuclear weapons their own ship had used. Any civilized species would have surrendered to save their lives. A young Altarian recruit shifted nervously. Did they surrender, Commander? Kelthak made that bitter sound again. They kept fighting. Lieutenant Rebecca Torres had lost both her legs in the nuclear blast, but she was still manning her weapons station, firing at our boarding parties. Sergeant David Kim was bleeding from radiation sickness, but he continued coordinating defensive positions. The veteran warrior's 3 eyes glowed brighter as his emotions intensified. Our boarding commander demanded their surrender. He offered medical treatment and honorable imprisonment. The human response terrified our soldiers more than any weapon could. Kelthak used his 6 arms to recreate the scene, his movements precise despite the alcohol. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Murphy, who was clearly dying from radiation exposure, looked at our boarding commander and said something that haunts me still. He said, "We did not come here to surrender. We came here to teach you that attacking Earth was a mistake you will never make again." The silence in the tavern was absolute. Even the station's background hum seemed muted as everyone listened to the impossible story. Murphy and his remaining crew activated something they called a dead man's switch, Celtic continued. It was a final explosive device that would destroy their ship completely, taking our boarding parties with them. They were willing to die to ensure we learn nothing from their technology. A Centaurian recruit spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "How did you escape, Commander?" Commander Morrison, who was dying in his captain's chair, called off the dead man's switch at the last second, Kelthek replied, "but not out of mercy or fear. He wanted us to survive so we could carry a message back to the hegemony fleet." The old warrior stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. Morrison looked directly at me, with eyes like burning ice, and said, "Tell your leaders that this was just one ship from one small fleet. Earth has thousands of ships and billions of people who will fight exactly like this. If you want a war with humanity, you will get one, but it will not be the war you expect." Kelthak sat back down heavily, the weight of years and memories pressing on his shoulders. The Retribution's crew died within hours of our return to the Crimson Thunder. They had fought and died for no strategic advantage, no territorial gain, no hope of survival. They fought purely to send a message. The Rigelian recruit's tentacles curled with confusion. What happened to War Chief Vorthak? Did he heed the warning? Kelthak's expression grew even darker. Vorthak was furious at the loss of so many troops to primitive weapons. He declared that humanity would be crushed completely for their impudence. He called for reinforcements and planned to strike directly at Earth itself. The old veteran finished his drink and set the glass down with finality. That decision cost the hegemony everything, because humanity's first ship had not been their strongest vessel or their best crew. It was just a sample of what they could do when threatened. Kelthak looked at each young face around the table. The real war was about to begin, and none of us understood what we had awakened. The tavern had grown completely silent as Kelthak prepared to tell the most devastating part of his story. His 6 arms moved restlessly as he struggled with memories that still caused him nightmares after 15 cycles. War Chief Vorthak assembled the largest hegemony fleet in galactic history, the old Zephyrian began. 300 dreadnoughts, 2,000 cruisers, and 50,000 support vessels. The armada stretched across space like a metal storm, powered by the combined might of 40 conquered worlds. A young recruit made a soft sound of awe. Such a fleet could conquer entire star systems within days. Vorthak was convinced that humanity's resistance was a fluke, Kelthak continued. He believed that one overwhelming attack on their home world would crush their spirit forever. Intelligence reports suggested Earth had perhaps 50 ships capable of interstellar travel. Our fleet outnumbered them 100 to 1. The veteran warrior's crystalline skin seemed to pulse with remembered emotion. The journey to the Sol system took 18 days. During that time, our communications intercepted human transmissions. They knew we were coming. Any rational species would have evacuated their population or prepared surrender terms. Kelthak gestured with his upper arms, while his lower hands remained clenched into fists. Instead, the humans were broadcasting something they called war songs across their communication networks. Primitive music about fighting against impossible odds and dying for their home world. Their entire planet seemed to be preparing for a battle they could not possibly win. A Centaurian recruit leaned forward nervously. "What happened when the fleet reached Earth, Commander?" "We dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system," Kelthak said, his voice growing quieter. Our sensors immediately detected the human fleet waiting for us. 57 ships, just as intelligence had predicted. They were arranged in a defensive formation between our armada and their blue home world. The old warrior paused to order another drink, his hands shaking more noticeably now. Admiral Patricia Hayes commanded the human defense fleet from a ship, called Indomitable. When Vorthak demanded their surrender, her response was broadcast across every communication frequency in the system. Kelthak's three eyes focused on the distance as he recalled the exact words. She said, "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. You have brought an army to attack our home and our families. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking we would be afraid. Your final mistake was believing you." Goodwin, the tavern patrons leaned closer, sensing the approaching climax of the story. Vorthak laughed at her words and ordered the attack, Kelthak continued. 300 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously. The energy discharge was visible from neighboring star systems. No force in the galaxy could survive such concentrated firepower. A Rigelian recruit whispered, "But the humans survived?" Kelthak nodded slowly. The human ships scattered like leaves before a hurricane, but they did not flee. Each vessel began executing maneuvers that defied everything we knew about space combat. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually calculated to confuse our targeting systems. The old veteran's voice grew stronger as he described the impossible battle. Captain Thomas Rodriguez of the cruiser Valiant led a squadron directly into our formation's center. His ships were taking massive damage, atmosphere venting, crews dying, but they kept advancing. They were not trying to win through superior firepower. Kelthak stood up again, his movements more agitated. Now, they were buying time. While we focused on destroying their visible fleet, something else was happening. Human ships we had not detected were moving through the asteroid belt, using the debris as cover. The recruits exchanged glances of growing amazement and terror. Commander Lisa Park led 12 ships loaded with something called planet crackers. Kelthak said, "Nuclear weapons 1,000 times more powerful than what we had seen before. But these were not targeted at our ships. They were aimed at the star itself." The tavern erupted in shocked murmurs. Attacking a star was considered impossible and suicidal. The humans were willing to destroy their own solar system to stop our invasion, Kelthak concluded grimly. That was when we realized we were not fighting a conventional enemy. We were fighting a species that would rather die than submit. Kelthak sat back down heavily, his 6 arms trembling with exhaustion and memory. The young recruits around him stared in fascination and horror as he prepared to finish his tale of humanity's entry into galactic warfare. When we realized the humans were prepared to destroy their own star system to stop us, the old Zephyrian said quietly, everything changed. War Chief Vorthak finally understood that this was not a normal conquest. This was a fight for survival against an enemy that redefined the meaning of warfare. A young Altarian recruit spoke nervously. "Did the hegemony retreat, Commander?" Kelthak made that bitter sound again. Vorthak was too proud to retreat, but too intelligent to ignore the threat. He ordered a partial withdrawal while sending negotiation requests to the human leadership. For the first time in hegemony history, we were asking for terms from a species we had come to conquer. The veteran warrior's crystalline skin pulsed with dim light as he remembered the historic moment. Admiral Hayes agreed to meet aboard the neutral station at the edge of the system, but she did not come alone. The human delegation included generals, scientists, and someone they called Ambassador Catherine Mitchell. Kelthak used his 6 arms to recreate the tense meeting scene. Vorthak expected to negotiate from a position of strength, despite the circumstances. After all, we still had the larger fleet and superior technology. What he discovered was that the humans had used our invasion as an opportunity to study our weaknesses. The tavern had grown completely silent again, as other patrons realized they were hearing about the founding of the Terran Empire. Ambassador Mitchell presented Vortak with detailed intelligence about every ship in our fleet. Kelthak continued. She knew our weapons specifications, our shield frequencies, our supply lines, and the locations of our homeworlds. While we had been focused on conquering Earth, they had been preparing to conquer us. A Centaurian recruit's armor plates clicked nervously. How was that possible, Commander? The humans had done something unprecedented, Kelthak explained. They had weaponized their own survival instinct. Every battle they fought, every ship they lost, every crew member who died, had provided them with information about our capabilities. They turned their defeats into intelligence-gathering operations. The old warrior stood up one final time, his massive frame commanding attention from everyone in the tavern. Mitchell then made an offer that changed galactic history. She said humanity would accept the hegemony's surrender and allow us to maintain our current territories under human protection. The recruits gasped in amazement. The idea of the conquered offering terms to the conquerors was unthinkable. Vortak was outraged, Kelthak remembered. He demanded to know how 57 ships could possibly defeat 300 dreadnoughts. Mitchell's response became legendary across the galaxy. She said, those 57 ships were just our local defense force. Our main fleet is still on its way. Kelthak's 3 eyes glowed brighter as he reached the climax of his story. At that moment, our long-range sensors detected something that made every hegemony commander freeze in terror. 2,000 human ships were approaching from deep space, moving faster than anything we had ever seen. The old veteran's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The ships that had defended Earth were not their strongest vessels. They were not their newest technology. They were not even their main military force. They were simply the ships that happened to be home when we arrived. A Rigelian recruit's tentacles curled with awe and fear. What happened to the hegemony fleet, Commander? We surrendered, Kelthak said simply. 300 dreadnoughts, 2,000 cruisers, and 50,000 support vessels surrendered to a species we had never heard of 6 months earlier. The greatest military force in galactic history became the foundation of humanity's new empire. The tavern remained silent as Kelthak finished his drink and prepared to leave. The humans kept their word. They allowed the hegemony to maintain local government under Terran oversight. But they also made sure we understood that Earth was no longer a primitive backwater world. Kelthak looked at each young face around the table one final time. Humanity had become the dominant power in the galaxy, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through their willingness to sacrifice everything for their principles. That is why veterans like me wake up screaming their names, not because they defeated us, but because they showed us what real courage looks like. The old Zephyrian warrior walked slowly toward the tavern exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind him, the young recruit sat in stunned contemplation of the story that explained how Earth had risen from an unknown world to the center of galactic civilization in less than a single year. The Terran Empire had been born not through conquest, but through humanity's refusal to surrender their values, even in the face of certain death.